Hi guys, how's everyone doing today? Just want to say thank you for watching, and today I wanted to talk about an old movie that came out back in 1981 called The Wave. It was a part of this series of ABC Afterschool Specials that many of you who grew up in the 80s would be quite familiar with, and some of you probably already seen The Wave. If you haven't, I truly recommend it. You can see it for free on YouTube. It was based on an experiment in high school by a teacher who did it in 1967, and what he wanted to do was teach to his students some of the realities of fascism. It starts off where he's giving a lesson on World War II, showing footage of some of the atrocities that went on in the concentration camps and explaining how it all unfolded. And some of the students asked, how could this have gone on? How could the Germans have allowed this to happen? So the teacher went back on some of his books because he wanted to try and figure out a way to demonstrate this to his students, because he wasn't really sure how to just give a simple answer that would make them understand. So he did this experiment which he called The Wave, and it was based on three forms of three rules, like these three slogans, which is strength through discipline, strength through community, and strength through action. And in the beginning, he starts it off with just some small, simple lessons about posturing, proper way of sitting, how to answer certain questions, that you should always stand up. More importantly, always address him by his name. The teacher character's name was Mr. Ross. Always say Mr. Ross and then give your answer a statement. And he also did some other small exercises, which for the most part, the students were pretty enthusiastic about in the beginning, but also kind of joking, just not seeing it as much. But more and more, he started to, hammer in discipline. That was the key thing that he focused on throughout the experiment. And in doing so, he made the students kind of feel like they were part of a group. And after a while, they started to embrace it more, following the rules, and to the point where they were actually not slacking off as much, doing their homework and working above and beyond the call of duty. One particular student was a kid named Robert, who was kind of the outcast of the class, where he was bullied a lot and everything, but he started to realize he wasn't being picked on anymore because he was becoming a part of the wave. He felt that inclusion, being a member of this group where he felt on equal terms with everyone else. He even went to the point of having them kind of dress a certain way and giving them out membership cards. Some of the cards he put little X's on, saying, for those with an X, you will be monitors. Your role will be to monitor all the students and make sure everyone is following the rules without exception. And they took on those responsibilities pretty seriously. And at first, its expansion seemed like a good thing, who would object to it? Some parents questioned it, but other parents thought hey, you know what, if they're doing the homework and, they're becoming more active in class, if they're learning, why not? But then it started to take on a certain darker tone, whereby fights were breaking out, some acts of violence were occurring. Not that the teacher was encouraging violence, but that the students were taking it upon themselves, all in the name of the wave. And one particular student, a member of the school paper, wrote an article against it, and when she did that, she was labeled an enemy. And some of the students either turned away from her, weren't being her friend anymore, and some were even becoming a little more hostile towards her. And, the student, her and her boyfriend, after a violent argument that almost really got ugly, and, her boyfriend starts to realize some of the flaws in this whole wave movement. They talk to the teacher and they encourage him to try and put an end to it. And even his wife and members of the faculty are trying to do so, because the wave expanded. It wasn't just in that classroom. Some of the students were members of the football team, and they introduced these rules, to the football team, and they got on board with it. So it started becoming really disruptive to the school. So the teacher, Mr. Ross, ensures these two students, saying, I am going to put an end to it, but it's got to be my way. And it's very important that he does that, because he wanted to teach a very essential lesson. And he arranges this meeting in the auditorium. And he says, this meeting, this rally, is for wave members only, And he tells them that the wave isn't just going on in their school, it's going on in schools across the country, that students across America are embracing the wave, and the students in the class become more excited and enthused by this. They're really looking forward to this rally. They start making banners, posters and everything, saying like, Mr. Ross, this is going to be great, Mr. Ross, we can do this. Come the day of that rally, they're all gathered in doing their little chant. They even had a hand gesture for the chant. You know, strength through discipline, strength through community, strength through action. And then the teacher gets on board and he shows a television screen with nothing but static. And they're all patiently waiting for this great leader to appear. You know, that Mr. Ross says is overseeing the entire wave. But nothing happens. At first there's a little confusion and some of the students are protesting, like, there is no leader, what's going on here? And then the teacher shows them on the big screen video footage of Adolf Hitler giving one of his speeches and showing what's going on at this Hitler rally. We see all the people lined up giving their hand gesture and everything, all with the swastika, all in perfect discipline, lined up, giving their full authority and intention to this one person. And the teacher, and at first the student's a little baffled, but then the teacher explains to him, this is what fascism is, this is how it starts. He explains how you all sacrifice your freedom, your individuality, just to feel superior, to be a part of this group. And the essential point he made is that, you know, we as the people are responsible for our actions, and that we should question what we do, and not blindly follow a leader, and to never allow a group's will to usurp your own individual rights, you know. And it was a pretty emotional lesson for a lot of the kids. You know, they started throwing off the bands and everything. They realized what they were doing, you know, the fault and everything about it. And, you know, the movie serves as an important lesson to anyone who wonders, like, you know, how these atrocities could have happened in World War II. And unfortunately, we're seeing some of the parallels go on today. And recently, there's been a lot of anger and frustration in the right because of Joe Biden's recent rally, where he labeled the people, the part of the MAGA movement, as semi-fascists. And I wanted to talk about that briefly because I've never really been one for name-calling. You know, I mean, yeah, sometimes I've been known to call certain individuals stupid or ignorant or reckless because that's what their behavior is doing. So that's not name-calling. I myself, you know, given some of the things that I've spoken out about, have been labeled things like snowflake, libtard and everything. This is coming from the party says, you know, F your feelings. And yet now, you know, they're feeling all offended because of being labeled as fascists. So let's focus on that a moment, on the person that they're all worshiping. Naturally, that would be Donald Trump. And during his administration, somebody else pointed out certain characteristics or achievements that Trump had done in his 4 years as president. He brought nationalism back. He brought back traditional family values. He focused on national security, making that paramount, telling you who the enemies were, who to hate, who to be against, which is some parallels you might remember in George Orwell's 1984, another interesting book if you haven't read it yet. I don't want to get off topic, but you know, he made the military supreme, and he engaged in nepotism and cronyism, putting family and friends in charge of government roles. Primarily people who weren't qualified for it, but put them there anyway, and most notably, these were people of wealth and great influence. And he ran the media. You know, if he saw a headline he didn't like, he called it fake news, or sometimes described the press as the enemy of the state, which they weren't. But all his followers embraced that. He undermined the elections, where he always complained that there was widespread voter fraud. Unless he won, then it was okay. Then the voter fraud didn't make a big difference. And he was a big pusher of, quote, law and order. These are the characteristics that you see in a fascist. Now, I'm not going to go to the point and label Donald Trump a fascist. I'm just pointing out some of these things You guys make your own determination. I'm not going to go to the point to call, like I said, people part of the MAGA movement or people who still support or voted for Donald Trump, as fascists. Because the point I'm trying to make is, what I did in a previous video is, what do they gain from all of this? For starters, some of the things that Trump didn't do when he was the president, and he could have done. He didn't expand healthcare. He didn't eliminate the national debt, quite the opposite. He brought it up. He didn't resolve international conflicts. He didn't improve free trade. In fact, he did a lot of meddling in trade, which didn't really do anything beneficial for the country. And he didn't do anything for infrastructure. He did appoint conservative justices to the Supreme Court, which, as we see today, some of the damage that's been causing. Most notably, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And, to be fair, that doesn't all fall on Trump. He's a part of it, but he's not the one that started it. That falls back on several members of the GOP. And tax cuts for the wealthy, which for the most part did very little or nothing for Trump supporters, for the voters. I'm talking about the ones in red states who are not millionaires or billionaires. So the whole thing is, why support him? What do you gain from that? So you can say what you want about Joe Biden, and I do have issues with him. Believe me, his presidency is far from perfect. But here are some of the accomplishments that have been going on recently from the left, from the Democratic Party, okay? And some things that Biden has tried to push for but hasn't quite succeeded yet. But at least the effort is there. He's pushed for a living wage, and he has done some expansion on healthcare by strengthening the Affordable Care Act. He got the American Rescue Plan passed, which extended unemployment, increased checks, talent credits, subsidized testing and vaccination programs. He passed the infrastructure bill, and he's made addresses against gun violence. He's had some recent job growth. He rejoined the Paris Accord to fight climate change, which we're starting to see some of the effects of that happening now in certain states, especially California. And he expanded on health care for the veterans. All of these things that the Republican Party have been voting against, or standing up against. His other most notable achievement, which has gotten him a lot of credit, is by some of the forgiveness he did for student debt, which Republicans and, members of the right have just been screaming out against. And some of them, like Ted Cruz, have even tried to take the matter to court in order to undo it. But why would you want to undo that? Why would you want to undo anything that is beneficial for the American people? And therein lies the point. What have we seen that is happening on the right lately, during the past 2 years, beyond Trump's presidency? We've seen book banning, They don't want to teach racism. They're okay with waving around these Confederate flags and everything, but God forbid we talk about slavery. That's a no-no, because we don't want white people to all feel like racists. They've been pushing the big lie, especially now during some of the rallies we've seen in the recent elections going on. Voter suppression as a result of it, making it harder for people to vote. They've taken away a woman's right to choose, compromising their health and their safety, claiming to be pro-life when in reality they are just simply anti-abortion, which is something I've talked about in detail. They've tried to undo the student loan forgiveness, like I said, and and one of the other things they also intend to do, which they have openly spoke about, certain members, is making cuts to Medicare, making cuts to Social Security, and also they intend to undo gay marriage and access to contraceptives, through the Supreme Court. Well, if you're pro-life, how do you not prevent abortions without contraceptives, without birth control? And again, like I said, the tax cuts for the wealthy, they seem to be proven more for corporations and for wealthy donors, and not the American people. And that's one of the points of fascism, is that it doesn't really do anything to benefit the people. And, You know, like I said before, with all the behavior going on, with the rallies we've seen today in some of the recent elections, and what's coming up in the midterms, and Donald Trump still going around on his stupid rallies with a lot of his sycophants, people like Lauren Boebert, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz. I could keep going on and on. The question I would ask any Trump supporter or any member who claims to be all MAGA with all the apparel and stuff like that is, if it's not fascism, if it's not extremism, then what would you call it? Okay? Honestly, I'm asking for a simple answer. What would you call it? Feel free to comment below. But the one thing I wouldn't call it is, I wouldn't call it beneficial for the American people, and most importantly, I wouldn't call it democratic, and I certainly wouldn't call it patriotic. It is not by any means patriotism. It's all serving up to the needs of one person, to the will and desires of one person. One thing Joe Biden does, he does not encourage violence, which we see plenty of going on the right. And, you know, we see all the hypocrisies and everything going on. They claim to be the party of law and order, yet when the law works against them, you know, like what happened on January 6th, where members of the Capitol Police were beaten and assaulted, and some of them killed. Where we see, you know, now defund the FBI. Why? Because Trump broke the law. So this whole law and order thing feels very one-sided. This whole movement thing with MAGA seems very self-serving. And when I say self-serving, serving for the person at the top running it, Donald Trump, and all the sycophants, you know, the politicians, you know, backing him up for it. One thing these politicians all have in common is that they get rewarded for this. You know, maybe not Trump in the capacity as president, but all the politicians that are simply doing it to stay in power, they remain in power, you know, with the MAGA movement. You know, they get paid high salaries. And when they start pushing acts of violence, with all the gaslighting that we hear now, where they still say, like, the election was stolen, which it wasn't. They can't prove it, but it doesn't matter, because it's all about, you know, serving up to the one person. It's all about this extremism. When these people go out and commit acts of violence, they're the ones that pay the price, these civilians. Everyone at January 6th, they're the ones that go to jail. While all, you know, Trump and all the sycophants remain comfortably free. Trump's got his little place in Mar-a-Lago. All these other politicians, you know, they got their good salaries and everything, and all the benefits that go along with it. They get to go home, while the ones that have been arrested, that are doing time, don't get to see their friends and family when they want to. In seeing what's going on with the left and what's going on with the right, what the right has done or hasn't done for the people, I should say, you got to really ask yourself, what are you getting from that? Well, is that really benefiting your country? And in the end, it really boils down to one question. And not the question as to what you would call it. Call it what you like. If you don't want to call it fascism, fine. It ain't patriotism. Call it whatever you want. But it doesn't do you any good. Because again, it all boils down to serving one person. Who do you want to vote for in the midterms, and more importantly in 2024, which I'm not sure how that's going to unfold. I don't want to speculate on that. That's too far ahead. I encourage people here and now, you know, now that some of the primaries are passed, with the midterms in November, is to get out and vote. Because what is the best way to fight this movement? You know, to go against these politicians who are only there to gaslight and serve themselves. You get out and vote and make sure that the Democratic Party, that the party I've just now that is proven to really be out to serve the American people, out to serve the country, not just in blue states, but in red states as well. Get them more in power. Get more of them elected. Get them a higher majority within the House and the Senate, so that when they want to pass future bills, they can do it with much greater ease, with much greater chance of success. You can vote for that. You can vote for democracy. You can vote for the country, for patriotism, or you can keep following this MAGA movement, you know. All I'll say is to my friends and everything that, you know, are still want to support Trump to this day, that is your choice. That is fine. But in the end, all I can say is you've just chosen a very strange hill to die on. Because in the end, what do you all get out of it? No one can ever really give me a solid answer. So in the end, the choice is up to you. Watch the movie The Wave. See if you can spot the parallels. See if it makes sense to you, you know. And ask yourself, you know, if you are still supporting Donald Trump, is this really the route that I want to go? Is this really the route that's best for the country, you know? In the end, the choice is up to you. I'm voting for the Democratic Party. I'm voting for democracy. I am voting for patriotism. Anyway, I hope you understand. Thank you for watching.